Rest there. Right, is everyone back that's coming back? Lock the doors. Bring your tea in. Ship the biscuits in. Right, we're on a fairly rapid session now because I want to try and stay on time and take you to lunch on time because some of our speakers have got to shoot off. Thanks very much for some fantastic questions coming in on Slido. We're going to romp through those right now. Now, if you've got questions from the audience, it's traditional that you put your hand up and wave at me. I will be looking at you and the audience, so just do that. That kind of gives me the... There was somebody in the back there you see that technique of putting your hand up? It's old school, but it works. And what I'll do is, see that thing there which is blue? Someone will throw that at you. Are you ready for that? Not yet, calm down, but when I come to you, someone will throw that at you, yes. It's not the right shape or the right colour, Paul, but anyway. Get with the program. Right, okay, I'm going to fire loads of questions on various topics, and panelists, if you just answer, if you want to ask, answer, then crack on. I'm going to start with one which is coming straight off, or several coming off of Slido, which is around the levels of cycling, and I suppose boosting levels of cycling and walking and sustainable forms of transport. There's a criticism that says the document really doesn't do enough justice to this area. In fact, there's a thing that says a scant mention of cycling. Darren, would that be a fair criticism? I mean, would you like to see more about cycling and boosting the levels of cycling and sustainable transport in the document?
Always. It's cycling, walking, but also public transport. It's about, I feel, connecting up different forms of transport and integration that comes through more strongly to me. I think it's not, in the right way, it's not over-favouring any particular form of transport, but when you get to the next stage in terms of what's going to be delivered, where the strategy ends up, there's going to have to be more articulation of what that means for individual modes. But I think it's right the way that the team at EEH have looked at this outside of transport modes and looked at it around people and opportunities and places.
Naomi, what do you say to that? Is it fair criticism? I mean, scant mention of it. I mean, you'd probably argue that it was a little bit more than scant mention.
No, I actually think it's an interesting point, because I think if you're taking that out of the document, then taking that as an opinion, then we've not got across the ambitions that we have. In some of the locations within the Heartland, it's very possible to cycle safely and feel safe to cycle around. We obviously have Oxford and Cambridge, some of the greatest cycling cities in the world, within the area. What we were trying to do through the Connecting People chapter of the outline transport strategy is say, but how do you take those incredible strengths from some of our cities and allow everywhere else to benefit from them? Knowing that in some places it's just not a reality to have an entire route, an entire journey made by bike or walking. They'll be too long. So then it comes into this point about interchange and how walking and cycling is part of a journey, but what we need to do is allow the point where you change mode to be easy, safe. There needs to be cycle parking, and all of those things need to be part of what we call a frictionless journey.
So the specific point that's made is, Reed Milton Keynes, do you have a journey map for trips by bike to help get more people on bikes?
The local authority will, I'm sure. We don't as a sub-regional transport body, but I'm absolutely sure. What I take from that is whether there's a role for us to have a look at bike routes across the Heartland and whether we can map something. Obviously, there's the National Cycle Network, but beyond that, so people can actually plan safe journeys.
Because, Stephen, that goes to the heart of this improving quality of life and, I suppose, air quality, reducing congestion, improving quality of life.
It does. Is this working?
Yeah, it is, Karen. Yeah.
It does. And actually, as Naomi said, there are some building blocks in and around the Heartland. There's very high levels of cycling, obviously, in places like Oxford and Cambridge. But it's worth remembering that new towns like Stevenage were built with a cycle infrastructure, which has been neglected. But I know the district council there, because I was talking to them yesterday, want to find ways of revitalising those. And I think through that you can get some models. And it's worth looking as well, I think, at some of the good practice that's emerging, like the Walthamstow Mini Holland, which is very much in London, but it is out of London, and it is showing what you can do to make walking and cycling attractive in a suburban area, which isn't different from a lot of the more inner suburban areas in some of the towns in the heartland. So I think there are opportunities here, and it is worth remembering that a lot of car journeys, even around the heartland, are very short distance, in which walking and cycling could be real alternatives.
Mayor Dave, I'm going to chuck this. Are you ready? Yeah. I'm going to go to Mayor Dave and then come to you. I'll come to you when you've caught it, but Mayor Dave, what are your thoughts on cycling?
Long throw. Well held. Yeah, I think the point that Darren made about the connectivity and where the modes, and Naomi's made it as well, about where that changes and making sure that's comfortable. And that includes the end of the journey. So if you do cycle or walk, having somewhere where you can change and if necessary shower. But we're also talking about conventional cycling probably. There's a lot of publicity now around Europe about electric scooters and the possibility, and I think unfortunately we had our first death from an electric scooter in the last week. How do they impact upon the transport system? So we've tried to be mode neutral in the report and actually look at solutions. Some of the solutions we won't know yet. 30 years is a long time in development.
Is this on the subject? Yeah, far away.
It's not the same subject exactly, no. It's not cycling.
We'll crack on them.
Okay. My name's Oliver Wright. I am the Vice Chairman Political of Oxford Western Abingdon Conservative Association. This is the first meeting I have been in about the expressway in which people have not been absolutely against it. The expressway and the ARC generally, with the exception of the railway. It has become a very political issue, certainly in Oxfordshire. The Lib Dems have opposed it. Indeed, Layla Moran has spoken out against it in Parliament. It's become politicised whether we like it or not. Personally, it seems to me like a pretty good idea to have the ARC. What can we do to stop it becoming a political football so that it, particularly at a local political level, where basically the votes are in opposing it?
Okay, Dave.
So I think we've got to break it up into several sections. So I think the bit between the A1 and the M1 tends to have been is done, the southern bypass for Bedford, and I think there is political agreement for Black Cat to Caxton Gibbet to complete the roads going east. From my conversations with people in the eastern section of the western section, if that makes sense, the big discussion is about how it benefits the residents, and we've got to always go back to what it benefits existing residents, not new residents, not residents that are coming in, and that a lot around is a lot around how you actually have connectivity. So we come back to this first mile, last mile. There's no point in having this road that runs through and gets people to Oxford city centre much quicker if you then wait an hour and a half to actually get the last mile. And actually we've got to deliver that, and we've got to show the benefits for it and engage with the communities to say, okay, what's it going to mean for existing residents? We've seen that growth that I talked about earlier on, and we now need the infrastructure to catch up because it isn't caught up. We do know that around a lot of those junctions, around the small towns, the historic towns, that actually some junctions are really clogged up and at peak time cause major problems.
But just to update us on those big projects, I mean, where are we with the expressway? We haven't got preferred routes.
We have Caxton, the consulting on the preferred route, Orange route, the northern route from Black Cat to Caxton Gibbet, so we're in the statutory consultation period now for that, and we'd hope to be, I think, starting next year sometime. I think the A14 team is going to be rolled over to that.
Okay, Darren, you look like you're clutching a microphone to make a point.
One of the areas I do disagree in terms of the content of the strategy is around the dominance of building of new roads. And from my perspective, there needs to be much more done to encourage behavioural change that takes people out of their cars, which might reduce the need for expressway-style roads. There is definitely need for road infrastructure and good quality road infrastructure that is well maintained and works in terms of access for buses and other forms of transport as well. But I feel there is an over-representation of new roads within that plan. But more broadly, I think the strategy is going in the right direction. But yes, you do need road infrastructure. And I think, to answer your question, how you can stop politicising it, I don't think that will be possible. It's going to be something that's thrown around at the national level. It will be debated in Parliament, and it will become a contentious point. And that's something which those who advocate the road need to stand up for what they believe in, and those who are opposing the road need to stand up, and where it falls is politics.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing to have infrastructure at the heart of politics. Stephen, do you want to say something?
Yes. I think that the heart of your question, Oliver, is how do you, is the one that Mayor Dave mentioned. How do you make this attractive for, how do you make the entire approach work for people who are already here? Yeah. I've been involved separately in a Transport for New Homes project, which is looking at what's being actually built, the kinds of housing that are being built. And a lot of it is very car dependent. Some of it doesn't even have pavements because there's a debate between the developer and the local authority about who should pay for them. I think, you know, it's completely reasonable for residents to kind of go, well, we're not having any of that. But on the other hand, you can have different forms of development. And this is why it's so important to have the integration between planning and transport that Ian talked about. If you just plan the roads, the railways and the housing separately, you'll end up with a lot of car-dependent development which won't work. It won't even work for motorists, actually, because it will just congest the existing road network.
Okay.
So I think we've got to do something different.
Ian, is that a point on this? Is this a point on this particular subject? Yeah. Can we get the blue mic up to the guy in the white jacket, and then Ian, and then I'll come back to Naomi and Dave. Ian.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to disagree with what's just been said by Stephen, but I think the key thing here is actually about strategic planning. It's recognising that there are major infrastructure investments, strategic infrastructure required, and we need to recognise that that will bring with it opportunities for development, for housing, for job growth. That's not a bad thing, that's actually something which we need to do. But we do need to make sure that they're planned together so that we don't end up with roads that have accidental consequences in terms of car-dependent housing, nor do we have housing coming forward which doesn't have the access to infrastructure.
But surely it's about the order you place this in. So if you have the hierarchy, quality of life is what needs to improve. Part of that is jobs. One of the problems, and it's interesting, the minister in his video talked about houses and jobs, and the order they do, they're usually talking about houses and infrastructure, and we need to actually change that order. Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a point in here that says more east-west connections with the rail network are key to changing people's reliance on the car, yet HS2 passes through the heartland without an interchange. Is that ever likely to change? Then I'm going to go up to the back there.
Well, I can pick up that point. My name's John Harvey. I'm a town councillor from Buckingham. I think there are so many issues around this. I mean, when are we going to see, for example, the zero carbon revision of the NPPF? So, for example, how on earth is it possible that we can see a massive, wonderful development in Silverstone with new visitor attractions and so on, and yet the county and district council in Aylesbury Vale and Buckinghamshire did not seek to include public transport into the Section 106 agreement? How on earth is that possible? So that transport north and south through Silverstone is now going to have to be by car rather than by a bus that comes once every Tuesday afternoon, which is pretty well all there is. How is it possible that we're still waiting for the east-west rail travel? It's like waiting for Godot, as I put in my question to the panel.
I haven't got to that one yet.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. And the one way of depoliticising the expressway is how about a bit of sunlight? Because right now there are villages up and down in North Buckinghamshire who are wondering if their house is going to be razed to the ground. Please, can we have that information out soon so people know what they're going to kick against and know exactly what the carbon implications are of that expressway, because there are implications of that towards zero carbon, there are implications of that towards people's backyard.
Naomi.
All those issues have to be addressed. Let's see some sunlight on this issue.
Yeah.
When's the sunlight coming, Naomi?
So the Highways England are working on preparing for a non-statutory consultation in the autumn. What will be challenging for residents is that there will be a number of routes in that non-statutory consultation, which will set out all of the options that Highways England have as they develop the expressway between Milton Keynes and Oxford. Now, I'm not going to dwell on the implications of that for now. I appreciate.
But I've heard that some people do know what the preferred route is, but they only get to see it if they sign an NDA. Is that true?
So if I can just take that in terms of the bit that Black Cat to catch a gibbet, I think for many a time we thought we knew what the preferred route was, and we weren't always right.
So there's no sense there are no NDAs have been signed by any authority or any individual.
The other side, so there wasn't in the Black Cat and gibbet to Black Cat. There's lots of people said we know what the preferred route was, and that wasn't necessarily the case.
What about the impacts on, should there be changes to the national planning policy frameworks? Ian, maybe you could take that.
Well, I mean, fundamentally, yes.
Yes.
The need for carbon action and the need for the government to step up to the plate in terms of providing enhanced powers and resources for planning in order to tackle climate change means that there are changes required to the NPPF to actually really tackle that issue. And I think alongside that, therefore, comes the strengthening of infrastructure and planning as a connected issue, connected approach.
Naomi, yes. Sorry, can you throw that black thing to this gentleman at the back there, by the way? Put your hand up there. There you go. Sorry, Dave, carry on.
Sorry, if I may just come back to a point that Darren...
Here. Oh, my Lord. Okay, right, sorry, Dave. Naomi.
Just a point about the road network and the response to sustainable travel within the road network, which comes on to this point about zero carbon as well. One of the things, and you'll see this afternoon some more information about the major road network, one of the things that we are really trying to do is make sure that where we are investing in roads, which has to happen to support growth to a level, those roads are either connected to an interchange in some way, connected to a railway hub in some way, and particularly applicable for non-motorised users as well. So in the framework which Martin Tugwell will discuss this afternoon, he will set out how much emphasis we put during our review process on some of the EEH priorities. So EEH have got 3 priorities that underpin the transport strategy: economic growth, quality of life and environment, and accessibility and inclusion. And we reviewed them against each of those.
Okay. Before I come there, I just want to bring Christopher in just for a couple of questions that are specifically around freight. FTA seems to be supporting clear roads for HGVs to transit and dismissing technologies such as drones and electric cargo bikes. Should you be embracing them? Are you thinking forward enough beyond the use of roads in your strategy, Chris?
It's a question of scale. Drones will exist, drones will be used, drones will work. E-cargo bikes even more so. The real question is, though, will they actually solve any of the problems we're interested in? The reality is we move currently 2.5 million tonnes of goods into Britain's towns and cities every day by HGV. Too often when we say urban freight, we immediately jump to thinking about small things collected at the high street or about deliveries to your house. That isn't what urban freight is about. It's vastly not. The biggest single user of urban freight is the construction industry. It is big stuff, big, heavy stuff. If anyone comes away from here thinking that the future is going to be magically solved by drones or e-cargo bikes, you will make bad decisions. So that's what I don't want people to do. It's not to say those things are useless, far from it. They will have their role. But if you take drones as an example, probably the area they might succeed is either in moving small packages of documents or maybe delivering takeaways. The reality is, if the problem you're trying to address is freight in the sense of vans and trucks, those things don't move by van or truck today. They're moving by car or bicycle or motorbike.
What about
so
rail? There's a question about rail, because there's a fear that freight, there's an induced traffic effect. Is there a role for rail, increased role for rail when it comes to freight?
There's absolutely a massive role for rail, and what we need to do is increase rail's modal share. And there's a lot we can do, and a lot of it, I think, is correctly identified in the freight study about investment to improve the rail infrastructure, about to make the actual network itself capable of taking bigger, longer freight trains. Rail freight works best at distance times quantity, and coming up for this region, coming in both from Southampton and Felixstowe, containerised transport, there's big opportunities to get more of that onto the railways. The key thing we need delivered here in the region is even an increasing number of rail freight interchanges, because the key restriction on the network is where can you get it off. The more convenient that is to users, the more you will drive an increase in the use of rail freight.
Okay, I'm going to come to put the question here, because I want to get loads of questions. Who else has got a question? There's a black there. Throw the black thing to the middle there. There you go. Far away, yes.
Michael Brooks, CPRE. Several speakers this morning have referred to engagement and consultation, yet this seems to be only with the usual suspects, namely the stakeholders, we who are represented here this morning. Apart from local expressway issues around Oxford, which I know has exercised many members of the public, but local communities and members of the public generally have been completely passed by so far with respect to the concept of the heartland, let alone freight and transport strategies. When is there going to be, and how and when, some meaningful consultation with members of the public directly and local communities?
David Naomi, when is it going to be meaningful, this consultation? Is it now?
Yeah, I mean, we just launched the consultation now to actually have the conversation. I think elected politicians would feel we've been bypassed in some of the decisions about ARCs and heartlands and LEPs and so forth. But this is why we've launched the consultation. We want to have that conversation. And at the last forum, we actually talked to all the board members about how we can engage with communities across the whole of the heartland, and that's from now until the autumn. And we were actually putting in process across different councils doing different things, different stakeholders, from the bus companies to the rail companies to local authorities. So it starts today, and there's a lot of stuff already in the pipeline.
Ian.
And we'd welcome talking to CPRE about how we might engage with you.
Absolutely.
Ian?
I'm conscious from examples around the world, not just in the UK, that there is an increasing use of digital technology in carrying out those engagement processes. I was told last week the City of Brisbane has carried out a consultation on its future blueprint, has reached 1 in 5 households using a mobile app to actually draw people into consultation. What sort of use of technology do you have in mind with the consultation that you're about to carry out, or you've launched today?
If I can take a step back on some of the thinking behind this, and then I'll talk about what we're going to do. So one of the huge challenges for us is that when you're talking about a transport strategy through to 2050, a lot of the users are so young at the moment that they don't engage because they don't know how to. So the consultation that Mayor Dave launched earlier is a real part of that, about how we bring the conversation to younger generations. When I showed you the Experian data earlier, mapping out personas across the heartland, the challenge with Experian data is it's only people that use bank accounts and credit cards. So automatically, we need to start looking at that younger generation.
But I think the point that Ian makes there is that a lot of the people who are going to be impacted by these plans, they don't engage with paper. No. They are digital. What are you doing to actually make sure that you are hitting the generation which is just linked to their phone?
So most of our local authority partners have youth councils now. Again, I accept that that's only the people that choose to be involved. And we've asked all of our forum members and their supporting officers to help us to access the young people that they are already engaging with. I know that Milton Keynes had a session with their youth parliament recently where it completely, on their transport planning work, it completely astounded them on the things that were coming out. So we're tapping into that. On the digital side, absolutely. We want to work through the social media channels, and Adam, our comms manager, is doing all of that planning. We thought about a SurveyMonkey as part of it. We've got a series of questions through the engagement, the outline document that we want to put into a SurveyMonkey. It might be that SurveyMonkey is a bit for people over 18, and we need to look at what people sub-18 use that might be more...
So that work is all on book. I mean, I know...
Everybody here that actually gets an email or a tweet, actually retweets or reputs on Facebook, and actually does it, then we actually have a huge reach. But it's down to all of us to make sure we do that reach and encourage others to do this.
But if it's anything, my son is a 16-year-old son, I have to ring him up to tell him I've sent him an email.
Very open. I've tried to tweet, Instagram as well.
Question here in the middle, yes. Yeah, go on, far away in black box.
What's that?
Thank you. The name's Roger Blake, Director of independent lobby group Rail Future. I'd like to, I hope, draw out a possibly more general point from the specific that's arisen in the context of what Chris said earlier and more recently about freight and East West Rail in particular. I think there are some real questions about how freight capable East West Rail is actually going to be designed for, what its capability will be. The general point coming out of that is one around deliverability. One understands the enormous pressures to just get on with it. Why is it all taking so long? Why have we been waiting? Deliver. Is capability likely to be a casualty of the pressures for deliverability? so that we design down to a budget and within an artificial timescale rather than up to a specification that is fit for the longer term?
Chris and then Naomi.
I think it's a really good point, because to make rail freight work, you need it to be the right sort of infrastructure. We need to be able to have the trains that are long enough, that are also wide and high enough, that they can travel on standard bogies, but they also needs to have that capacity to be frequent enough, because that's one of the biggest reasons my members on the customer side say they don't use rail. It's sometimes not the cost, it's the inflexibility. Compared to the almost infinite flexibility you get from road. So having that capacity to take a lot of trains, but for those trains to be as long as possible and as wide as possible, and for that service to be one route or another, the combination of routes, it's a network, it's not just about one piece of track, but between that to offer that good service is what we need.
Naomi?
I think I agree with that. In terms of the East West Rail opportunities, the freight study, I don't know whether you've had a look at the summary that's published out and it's available outside, has in there some of the work that EEH wants to do with East West Rail to ensure that we are maximising the freight opportunities along the line. It comes back to capacity, but by working now in the process, we're able to do as much as we can to support the opportunities that are on that line. And the freight study captures that and is a real opportunity. So I would recommend having a look at the conclusions that we've drawn in that and the work that we're going to do taking that forward.
Okay, chap with the white shirt and the microphone.
Well, it's actually white with pink stripes on it.
Should have gone the white one. Should have gone the white one.
No, my question is, in any kind of strategy that's kind of long-term like this, we talk a lot about, there's always going to be something in there about kind of autonomous vehicles, and it's something that kind of we all see with these kind of Amazon and Google trials. But is there not a danger here that we're opening ourselves up to actually not achieving the mode shift that we want? And are we opening ourselves up to a lot of actually induced demand if we do manage to unclog the roads with kind of Google technology, more people use it, and we end up in exactly the same position we're in now?
Darren, I think you tackle that one. And then Stephen.
I think there's a risk, but there's also an opportunity. So connected autonomous vehicles present an opportunity to supplement the public transport system. The risk we have is they disrupt and displace the public transport system. This is where it's the role of the local authorities and the sub-regional body to ensure that they plan effectively, put in place the right mass transit and the behaviour change programmes needed to encourage use of public transport on active travel, so that the default is not your little autonomous pod that takes you where you want to go, but it's your mass transit train or bus, it's your bike, it's your walk-in. So I think there's something here which is the responsibility of local authorities and national government as well to get right. I do see there's a risk.
So when at a time when local authorities are having massive cuts in funding and it's only about funding, so you know the most conservative is 29% cut, and we subsidise rural routes, and my authority continues to do so, one of the top performing ones there. It's very difficult to have extra money in there when we have a growing, and we took old as 85 now in local authorities, because that's when the big care packages kick in. When that demand is growing, 30% increase in the next 7 years for that, and we still have to subsidise it. So if government wants to do this, they have to actually put the proper money into it and not continue to cut money from the people delivering frontline services.
I completely agree. There needs to be a fundamental rethink of how local authorities are funded for transport, how revenue streams can be created
funded.
and funded.
So Stephen, what's the Heartland's role in driving these new forms of mobility?
Well, I think there are, firstly, I think you could get caught up on the autonomous bit of connected autonomous vehicles and forget the connected bit, and actually immediately there's many more opportunities for the connected bit because of the data you can generate and use in terms of improving the management of the transport systems we've got. Secondly, on autonomous vehicles, there are clearly opportunities for developing laboratories for them, and actually the business park where we are is clearly one of those where types of autonomous vehicles could be part of the development here. But I think it's worth saying, I noticed that the government's future of urban mobility strategy was very clear that in cities you don't have lots of autonomous vehicles running around the place, that walking and cycling and mass transit are the ways forward. And I think that's still true in even in a lot of the heartland, simply because if you just have, as Darren says, lots of autonomous pods running around the place, you'll just add to congestion. Your point about induced demands, well taken. So I think rather than lie back and wait for the technology to do what it will, and the technology companies to do what they will, I think it's important that we establish what rules and terms of engagement for them. And actually, picking up my behaviour psychologist colleague in the audience, nobody's ever actually gone and asked people whether they want any of this stuff. And actually, it would be quite interesting to do that.
Okay, well, I've got time for one more question. Just throw the mic at this chap here. There you go. Excellent, far away. Make it quick.
I think everybody's skirted around this until Stephen just mentioned data. Who's going to harvest this data? Who's going to own it? Who's going to make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong hands? I don't think anybody here wants anyone to know when they are in or out of their home, and all of the various other things. I don't think we want our data being sold to McDonald's so that McDonald's know when we're driving past and tempt us with a cheeseburger. So
they already know, don't worry. Stephen, data security.
I think it's critical, but I think you can get a lot of benefits from the data that's around without everybody knowing, the data companies knowing where you are. Again, this is about setting clear rules. But there is data around. It isn't just the data from mobile phones. Northamptonshire did a lot of work on just getting origin and destination data from the main travel generators and use that as part of its total transport programme to design better transport networks. At the moment, the way in which we do a lot of transport planning here is a bit antediluvian, and it involves going out and stopping vehicles twice a year and asking them what they're doing. Actually, we've got to we can use the data that's around to do better than that with good data security.
Okay, Naomi.
Just to add to that, and to give Stephen reassurance, we, in our policy scenario tool, are actually using origin and destination data from O2, which we've got via the Highways England. And so we're exactly doing that.
But we haven't got that linked to an individual phone number. That's just raw data. So the blue data, the Bluetooth data we're using, some of our traffic stuff doesn't actually say who it is, just as a car is passing that has Bluetooth.
I'm going to finish, because we're banging out of time, on one subject we haven't really tackled very much. Just very quickly, start with you, Ian. How can the Heartland work with local planning authorities in supporting strategic housing developments, in particular the Garden Town initiatives across the Arc? Any thoughts about that? And then Dave, maybe comment?
Well, it goes back to this issue about having a vision which everybody, including the local authorities, the local planning authorities, are signed up to. Because if there's a shared view, not just about what infrastructure is to be delivered, but what development that infrastructure could help deliver, and a shared view about what sort of form that development has to take, goes back to the issue about walking and cycling. If you are actually planning those developments in a way which enables walking and cycling, has services available at a local level, that is a way of moving towards sustainable growth and sustainable development. But it does need communication. It needs everybody to buy into that vision.
Stephen, you look like you want to say something.
I do, because I think I'm right in saying this week the RTPI, CIHT and others is launching a Better Places guidance for use by planners.
Martin's nodding his head, so yes, the answer is yes.
And next week, the Transport for New Homes project that I'm involved in is launching a checklist to be used by people who are not professionals to judge new housing developments on how well they promote sustainable transport. So there's a lot of tools around now that will help this happen.
Dave, final word from Dave.
We've got to actually change the NPPF and the planning framework so that all this infrastructure, cycling routes, broadband and everything is in at the beginning, because people are only going to have a modal change when they move house. Because you move house, you say, I'm going to actually lead a better lifestyle and eat healthy, I'm going to cycle. If your first cycle route, you come across a wall you can't get over, you're going to revert to your car. It has to be in place before the first house is occupied.
Okay. Naomi, it looks like you want the final word.
Sorry, That's the chair of my forum next to me. I just wanted to add to Dave's comment that the other thing that complements all of that is funding. And frankly, piecemeal packages of funding make it very, very hard to do this. But a grown-up conversation with government and local partners that says we need to do all of these things and this is how they work together, don't piecemeal the funding, don't make it hard, will help solve that.
Thank you very much, and that will give us a really good segue into our next session. But right now, thank you very much to our panel, our expert panel, and also to Naomi and Mayor Dave for really fleshing out what's in the document. Have a good look at it, and of course, get stuck into the consultation. So.